land grabbing is simply the inability of a bona fide purchaser to peacefully possess a land due to adverse claim from the owners or the original settlers or the children of the original settlers. And I said we're going to be discussing the guide, how to guide against them. What do you really need to know when you are transacting or you are buying from them under customary law? We've discussed the Land Use Act, where I said before the Land Use Act, lands were given to the original settlers, that's the first settlers. But with the coming of the Land Use Act, that is no longer the norm. But remember, even with the advent of the Land Use Act, when we discussed it, I said, because the governor or the government feels that the original settlers will still have need for some parts or portion of the land that the state has now taken up, they still give them some parts of the land. That was where we discussed accession, we discussed gazettes and all of that, how these lands are excised back to these owners. So some of these owners, they have even sold, even before the promulgation of the Land Use Act. So what the state government now does is they do what we call deemed grants. They kind of regularize it for you. But even at that, it does not exonerate you from this problem of land grabbing. The issue of land grabbing has really been in the front burner. Even the states has now had to make laws to kind of curb these threats. But still at that, the issue has not been fully addressed, because these people that we are talking about, the land grabbers in question, it is more like their profession. Just as you and I have our own profession, that is how this issue of land grabbing has become a source of livelihood to some rural dwellers. It doesn't even have to be a rural location, but to some persons who claim to be original settlers, or who claim to say that their fathers were the original settlers. How do they operate, these land grabbers? Often at times, having bought from them, they will sell to numerous other buyers, unsuspecting buyers. They may be selling a particular piece of land to 10 people. So at the end of the day, what you have is a case of adverse claims, multiple claims of ownership on a particular piece of land. And then in order to curb these threats, I just said, okay, let's touch on it, so that at least for those of us who have not fallen victim, so that we can guide against it. And for those of us who still have persons who are yet to, or who are planning to kind of make this investment, at least we'll be able to advise them on how to go about it. I was talking about how they normally operate. I said normally is actually sale and reselling. They sell to unsuspecting buyers. They can sell to a couple of people who are unsuspecting, and then the person who is the bona fide owner becomes difficult to determine. Secondly, it could be by way of encroachments. Sometimes, for those persons who have had one or two dealings with our firm, when we take briefs, we often will say, maybe we want a surveyor to pick the coordinates, and you begin to wonder, what has the lawyer got to do with the surveyor? But when we treated perfection, I talked about the need to always engage professionals, people like surveyors and architects, particularly when it comes to real estate investments. The issue of encroachments for land grabbers is another way that they kind of manipulate real estate investments. You could actually buy a parcel of land, or let's just say a plot of land. The standard plot here is 600 square meter. And then while you are resting somewhere, believing that your investment is secured, some other persons would have manipulatively taken a part of your land. And by the time you now come wanting to do your development on it, you see that you either have little or nothing left, or they would have, sometimes they encroach into the larger part. It could be the smaller part, but either way, there's nobody that wants to make an investment and then lose a part of the investment to these people called land grabbers. Sometimes they could deny you peaceful possession. And that's what's rampant in most parts of Nigeria, particularly states that are not Lagos. In Lagos here, maybe because of the economic activity, the high volume of economic activity, they just take and resell, or they encroach on it substantially, so much so that you can't do anything with the remainder parts. In other parts where we don't have so much economic activities, what they do is they deny you peaceful possession. You can want to lay your foundation and they come with a list. If you do your decking, they come with another list. So, or they tell you that you did not meet the right people. You may have to come and pay some other monies again. So I've even joined the issue of extortion and then denial of peaceful possession. They can continue to extort you, particularly when the transaction was not followed up properly from the onset. So when dealing with them, you have to actually dine with them with a very long spoon, because you know what you are in for. And that is why some persons have now seen the issue of dealing with real estate companies as a safe way of evading them. But that is another issue on its own, which we probably will still discuss in this learning series subsequently, but not today. So dealing with real estate company does not totally shield you from this issue, because that particular one again has its own disadvantages, just as dealing with the Omoniles have the disadvantages that we are bringing to the fore today. So I was saying that when you are dealing with them, you have to actually deal with them with a very long spoon, knowing what you're going in for. Now, what should a real estate investor know? What should you do before investing? And if you have invested in family properties or properties that are prone to this issue of land grabbing, Omoniles, and all of that, what should you do? If you have not invested, if you are yet to invest, what should you do? Watch out for the red flags. Watch out in areas like the vendors. Who are you transacting with? When we discussed family property, I said without the family head, a sale under customary law is null and void ab initio. From the onset is a nullity. You cannot be transacting with the indigent of a particular location and then the family head, because they normally have family head whom they sometimes refer to in this part where I'm presenting from as the Bale or the Oba, or whichever one is applicable. They normally have family heads who are their representatives. So you cannot be dealing under customary law and then the vendor is an agent who is not traceable to the original settlers. So in doing your due diligence, which I keep saying you must ensure to do, because it's even better to err on the side of caution. Sometimes when you advise clients to do due diligence, it's as if maybe you are not saving costs. But in the long run, you find out that most of these due diligence, they either end up in a successful sale or they end up with the sale not being consummated. Because when we see a lot of red flags like that, we then advise the clients, because the lawyer's duty is actually to advise the clients, like, okay, this and this and this is what we have been able to bring to the fore. These are legal opinion. So what do you want to be done? And in recent time, barely a week ago, a client contacted me. From another person actually gave the referral overseas and was like, they want to conclude a transaction. And because of the urgency with which the client spoke, I was already kind of skeptical, like what kind of transaction is this? Why must it be consummated tomorrow morning? And I said, well, we don't deal like that. We normally don't take briefs that way. We cannot be in a hurry and then you lose your hard-earned money. What a law firm is actually about is so that when you make your investment, you can go to bed with your eyes closed. Now, thankfully for us, the woman listened and she was like, okay, go ahead. The brother too was kind of compliant, said go ahead. They went and they've already done the site inspection and all of that. only for us to find out that the particular document that they were buying under was non-existent. So imagine that they've already parted with money. If they've already parted with money, then they call the lawyer in for damage control, which we normally advise against. Always get an expert's opinion, whether law or any other thing. Once it has to do with professional advice or any other advice, try as much as possible to get that advice, because it could save you a whole lot. I was talking about red flags in terms of who is selling for you before I digress to the issue that we encountered last week. You must be very sure that you are dealing with the right family. Some vendors can go to the extent of making up a family. You will actually see an elderly person who will fit in as the head of the family. You will see somebody that will actually look like the secretary. So if you are not calm enough, or if you are not experienced enough, if you are not an experienced practitioner, you may not be able to decipher. You may not be able to actually piece two and two together to find out that this transaction is not looking good. So because we've had experiences like that, where the people who you went to meet are not the right persons you ought to have been dealing with, we have now put in some guidelines. Now, there are some areas that have been marked. There are some areas that have been marked. And if you're dealing with the right professional, the professional should be able to advise you. Like, that particular location, the order of the day is land grabbing. I actually have a pending case in Omonile, here in Lagos, for a property that was bought in 1986, for which the original buyer is not alive. It's no more alive, but the children who are supposed to be, the next of kin, or the ones that the property will naturally fall back to, are now dealing with an adverse claim. You begin to wonder, for a property that was bought in 86, over 30 years, is now that people are coming up. As a matter of fact, they brought down the fence that was there before, and then they began to erect their own fence. They even dug a borehole. Is that bad? There are some areas where once you mention that particular area or some parts of this place where I'm presenting from, people will like, that's the order of the day. They know them. Some can even mention these particular peoples that we are addressing as the Omoniles, that is sons of the soil, sons of the land. They are the ones who normally perpetuate this land grabbing issue. In some other states, one young youth can just get up and say, I need to travel, or I need to do something, or I'm hungry, go and sell so and so land. It's not bad. So that is why one must tread cautiously, particularly when you're dealing with lands that has a traditional history attached to it. If you have not bought, these particular things that I've mentioned will be able to guide you. At least when you are buying now, you know that it's a community land. You have to be very cautious. Land investments or property investments, they are not investments that will conclude. Once that rush, that pressure is there, as a firm, we are always skeptical. Once that pressure is there, if you keep calling that the agent said someone else wants to pay and they want to pay, before you paid, that land was there and nobody paid. So if now you have not consulted a lawyer and now they want to pay, why not allow them to pay? Because other properties will be available for purchase. I usually do not encourage that buying under duress or under pressure. Now, in terms of documents, what should you watch out for? There are some persons that have actually bought land and all they have is a receipt. You know, when we discussed the title, understanding title, I said a receipt is not a title. You cannot